In a lot of our recent episodes, regardless of what the topic started out as, I've noticed we've found our way around always talking about Instagram. And within that subject of Instagram, inevitably, we talk about growth. Growing our follower count or growing our views on social media. And frankly, I want to scream from the mountaintops and pray to get all of you, my dear fellow makers, to just stop for 1 second and think critically with me. Thinking critically is precisely what we're going to do on this week's infrequent solo episode to help tie together some of the recent conversations we've had here on the Maker's Playbook podcast, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. As always, I'm your host, the ever-opinionated Rebecca Ickes Carra. Okay, so why am I so riled up about growth? After all, half the time I'm over here asking you to please share this podcast with your maker's friends if you found an episode particularly helpful or inspiring. Isn't that going after growth? Absolutely. But I'm asking you to screenshot this episode and share it on your IG stories after you wipe the mud off your hands because of a very particular goal in mind. A goal that is rooted within the real life, day-to-day realities of my being fully self-employed and the dollar amounts next to the mortgage statement and the electricity bill and everything else that arrives every month, regardless of how many pots we sell or photos I take. What the heck am I talking about? What is it that makes me want to scream from the mountaintops? It's the pervasive goal of growth without purpose. Why do you want to reach 10,000 followers on Instagram? For what purpose? What will it do? Or rather, what do you think it will do? I could also add to this the perspective of growing our businesses or side hustles in all sorts of other ways, not just Instagram. Like having assistants, and then having full-time employees, having separate studio spaces from our homes, and then having swanky storefronts, hitting that mystical 6-figure mark, whether that be in revenue and sales or in salary, I guess, for someone. And in fact, over the course of the last 12 years, I've done most of those things. All but one of those things, really. I've launched second and third companies. I've done all the things on the imaginary good business owner checklist. And I still felt like I was behind. Or that I clearly wasn't doing enough, even though I was often working 12-hour days. And you know what? Now, I'm doing less, actually. And succeeding more. Instead of 20 weddings a year, I'm photographing 11. And next year, I might manage to only photograph 8. How is that possible when I'm the primary earner for not only myself, but now 2 of us? And 3, of course, if we count Hendrix. Because I got clear with myself about what amount of growth was actually necessary to have the life that I actually want to have. Not what was needed to look fancy. Not what was needed to keep up with the metaphorical Joneses that we all compare ourselves to in one way or another almost constantly. I've spent the last couple of years getting incredibly clear and taking a cold, hard look at the numbers, at the expenses necessary to keep the business running, and at the revenue necessary to not only cover those expenses, but to pay myself a reasonable salary. And plus, before all of that, first deciding what I wanted life to actually look like. Because as you've just heard from Becca Otis on last week's episode, the life of being self-employed while managing a storefront and staff is a heck of a lot different than the life of being a solopreneur. Becca is intentionally choosing not to grow. I cannot tell you how much I want to save all of my maker friends from the errors that I've learned the hard way and that I see so many other people making. The internet is constantly shouting at us to add more onto our plate. So you started an Instagram account now, huh? All right, well, you need to go make reels. Oh, and also now there's a new subscriber feature, so you better make more content to share only with subscribers on top of what you're already creating to attract new followers. Also, have you heard of this thing called SEO? You should make sure you're a total expert in that if you want to have a website. And don't forget about TikTok and YouTube and blogging and you're burnt out. At least I was. I was endlessly treading water in the ocean of mindless growth. And frankly, spending a lot of money doing it. So here is my encouragement for you all on this week's solo episode. Never stop asking yourself why. When the thought of I should be doing whatever the new thing is slips into your mind at probably 1 a.m., ask yourself why. Why should you be posting consistently to Instagram? If the answer is because a bunch of people said so, I want you to take a long walk. Well, I want you to take a long walk in the morning. First, I want you to be able to fall back asleep, hopefully. And then when you wake up, take a long walk. And again, ask yourself why. Now, instead of being negative all the time, I know I can be a bit of a Debbie Downer. Let me give you an example of a positive response here. So the question is, why should you be posting consistently to Instagram? Answer, because I want to grow my audience. Okay, next question. Why do you want to grow your audience? Answer, because I've researched who my ideal customers are and it is clear that they spend a lot of time on Instagram. Question, why do you need to find more ideal customers? Answer, because it's my goal to quit my full-time job by the end of 2023, and in order to financially do that in a safe way, I need to sell enough of my work to replace my salary. I currently only sell about half of that amount, therefore I need more customers. Next question. Why do you want your customers to come specifically from Instagram? Answer. Because so far my best customers who have returned and bought pieces from me again and again have all originally found me on Instagram. Or an alternative answer to that could be because I hate the idea of paying for a booth fee at a local market that's outside when the weather could be bad and I might not sell enough work to make up for that booth fee, let alone my salary. You see where I'm going here? I could keep going on and on with hypothetical questions and answers, but I hope you're getting the idea. The pursuit of growth without a deeper purpose is endless and disheartening. And if we are showing up somewhere without any energy, assuming already that it's not going to work, but doing it anyway, because we feel like we have to, like making reels perhaps, I can guarantee you from personal experience, it ain't going to work. On the other hand, if we are clear on our goals, if we know why we are doing the things that we're doing, if we know why we are staying up late at night or taking time away from our loved ones to accomplish some random task for social media, we can focus in on what needs to be done with confidence, show up with energy, and also, just as importantly, not get sucked down a new rabbit hole of some new thing the internet tells us we could or should be doing. And then add that to the new thing of other endless new things on our list that we're already trying to do, but don't have enough time to really fully successfully accomplish. Because we're only one person in a 24-hour day and 7 days in the week, and you do need to sleep. To clarify the title of this episode, the myth of growth is that growing, whatever it might be, growing your follower account, growing your income, growing your email subscribers, your revenue streams, the list is clearly endless. But the myth of growth is that growing on its own, by itself, will solve whatever problem you might be facing. And here's the cold hard truth. And I'm going to keep using Instagram as an example, mostly just because it's an easy one that I think most of us experience on a daily basis. But you could probably substitute this for something else. If you aren't successfully engaging an audience on Instagram, for example, of 100 people, growing to 1,000 or to 10,000 isn't going to solve the problem. The myth of growth tells us that if you aren't selling enough pots with 100 followers, then you just need to grow to 10,000 and you'll be able to sell enough to make a living. But the myth of growth does not acknowledge what a conversion rate means. So if you're selling your pots to 100 followers and 90 of them always buy something from you, first off, that's incredible. That's a 90% conversion rate, which is pretty much unheard of. And yes, indeed, presumably, if you keep that conversion rate, growing your following to 1,000 or 10,000 might very well earn you enough money to make a reasonable living and quit that day job. But if you're selling your pots to 100 followers and 2 of them buy something, well, that's a 2% conversion rate. It's not actually particularly bad with the average of conversion rates out there, but growing to as many as even 10,000 followers might still not be enough for you to actually safely financially quit that day job. But what does the work look like to grow your following to 10,000 and to convert 2% of them, as opposed to loving on those 100 followers you already have and going from selling to 2 of them to selling to 90? Do you see how important it is to put some guardrails around our ideas of growth? Life, and therefore business, making a living from the things we make, is often more complex than the internet makes it seem. My friends, we need to practice thinking critically when the world is shouting at us and making decisions based on what is right for our own goals and our own personal lives. What stages we're in will shift and change and be different than the influencer who has a staff of 3 full-time employees and no kids to allow them to make 3 reels every single day and tell you should do the same thing if you want to see any growth. This all being said, after you've thought critically about growth, the answer still very well could be that yes, you do in fact need to grow your audience, or at least sell more of your work online. So again, staying solution focused here rather than just the Debbie Downer. How do we grow? Well, it seems that in coming to discuss the pros and cons of platforms like Instagram with so many makers over the last couple of years on the podcast, there is one thing that every single person has said: consistency. Consistency was the key to their growth, whether that be 5 or 7 or so years ago, like Kurt Hammerly on episode 209, or Kenny Singh of Turn Studios on episode 304. Consistency was also the key to growth for Jackie Wright just recently on episode 309, who did it in the past year. But I know consistency can feel hard when you aren't feeling particularly confident about how to create the content to post consistently with in the first place. And there's that dreaded word, content. Now, I explained my thoughts on the current conversation of content versus art recently, ironically, in Instagram, in a post on Instagram, that is. So if you missed that, then go ahead and pop on over to @TheMakersPlaybook on Instagram after you're done with this episode and just have a look there. I'm not going to get into it all over again here. That would be the length of a whole nother podcast episode. It is pretty easy to find since it's a post that is in all text that says, art is not being called content. So, Anyway, if after all of this, you've asked yourself all the why questions and clearly there is still a need to grow, because as I said at the start of this episode, I'm still hoping to grow this podcast and our own Instagram. Growth isn't innately bad. It just needs to be strategic and intentional to keep us healthy about it and not needlessly stressed for no reason. So, if after all of this, you still want help knowing how to repeatedly create the type of photos that you would be proud to share online, that will give you the confidence to show up consistently, to achieve those goals of growth, that allow you to sell more of your work and build that viable life-giving business, well, then that is exactly why I'm doing 2 big things this next week, for those of you listening along in real time. First, as you've heard mentioned, I am once again opening the doors to the Maker's Photography Styling System. Just in time for you to be able to have all of my tips and tricks and easy to follow systems in place before the holiday shopping season craziness, like as you're actually needing to take photos for all those shop updates. The Maker's Photography Styling System is a 6-week step-by-step course that will get you quickly and easily taking consistent, professional-looking photos that showcase the scale of your pieces with accurate glaze colors and help convert viewers into customers. It doesn't matter what kind of camera you have. Yes, even an old cell phone will work. And you do not need to buy any expensive equipment, nor will I recommend it. The lessons are all recorded, so you don't have to worry about trying to synchronize our very disparate time zones. But I'm also available for weekly Q&A, both live as well as written. You've heard me talk about this course off and on, and in fact, Jackie had mentioned it a couple of weeks ago on episode 309, how the skills she learned from the Maker's Photography Styling System helped give her a quick, repeatable system to create those consistent content photos that has indeed helped her grow her online presence over the last couple of years. There's a whole bunch more info you can check out coming up soon. I'm finishing putting everything together, so just hit me up in a DM on Instagram at The Maker's Playbook if you want to be sure not to miss out. I'll be posting more about it. I just don't have the link quite ready for you just yet. More to come soon. But I did say I was doing 2 big things this week, and this one I do have a URL for you for. Anyway, the second thing is something that really nobody trying to showcase their work on the internet these days should miss out on. While the course is 6 weeks and one of the few things that I offer that frankly is not free, because it's just not possible given all that goes into it, the second thing, back by popular demand, is indeed free. Our live webinar about the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes I see all the time online, and of course, how to avoid them, we're staying solution focused here, is coming back. So, if the course feels like a bit much for you right now, still consider snagging a free spot for this webinar, because I promise you in the first 15 minutes, you will already have a couple of quick tips and tricks to up-level your photography and to start standing out from the endless crowd of very lovely potters holding their mugs in one hand while trying to take a photo with their cell phone in the other hand. No shame, my friends, we've all done it, but there are also easier solutions that don't require you to be a contortionist. So, you can reserve your spot for the free live webinar on the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes by visiting makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. It's really long, so one more time. makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. Now, with all that's going on, I am going to be taking a brief 2-week break of new podcast episodes after this one. Frankly, the free live webinar is packed with information, and I'm hosting it 2 different times to be sure that we can provide solutions to as many different time zones as possible. Yes, my dear Australian friends, I'm looking at you. There is a time that does not require you to be awake at 4 a.m. But I've learned from the past that hosting these live webinars, because like I said, it is live, I am there in the flesh, it also takes a lot of energy, even for my incredibly extroverted self. So I'll be available for loads and loads of question and answer during the webinar as well as after. So I'm finally going to be realistic with myself on what all I can imagine to get done in a 24-hour day. Yes, I'm actually taking my own advice. I know it's shocking. We'll just have a little break here on the podcast. So I do hope that you'll come join me for the free live webinar about the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes as a filler for your podcast episode binging, if you will. Not only so that I can help you save time and make photography far less painful for you, of course, but also, so that I can finally see your faces. Always talking to a blinking green light is weird. I'm staring at my computer screen talking like you're here in the room with me. And while you of course don't have to actually have your video camera turned on to join the webinar by any stretch of the imagination, it's also just nice to know that there are actual humans on the other side of the computer when you're sitting at a computer. So, anyway, I'm rambling. The point is, wipe the mud off your hands, click on over to makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography to save your spot for the free live webinar about the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes and how to avoid them, even if you're using a cell phone. You do indeed have to actually save your spot because thanks to the variety of webinar hosting business models out there, spaces are indeed limited. Now, it may seem counterintuitive to be promoting the ways in which I offer to teach makers how to take better photos for the internet in the same breath that I'm encouraging us all to worry less about growing on Instagram. After all, if I emphasize the need to have high quality, amazing looking photos and video online in order to grow, it would encourage more people to sign up, right? But here's something I find incredibly important, my friends. There are a lot of quote unquote online educators out there. And I've spent a lot of money being convinced into buying many of their courses. Frankly, it's an embarrassing amount of money. And that's just not what I'm about. I think every educator out there should provide context around why they have any expertise in the subject matter that they teach, what skills they are actually providing, why you might need those skills, and whether or not, in order to see the results that they promise, students will need to spend any additional resources, be it time or money, on other things, like equipment, or frankly, for a lot of those educators, I'm using air quotes on this side of the mic, a lot of times more courses that they sell, right? I want you to have the information to think critically about every decision you make, whether that be about the myth of growth or whether that be about something as simple as giving me your email address in order to join a webinar. I do not want you to sign up to join our webinar on the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes simply because the last month of podcast interviews has you feeling behind on Instagram. Instead, I want you to pause and think strategically about why you are going to give any of your priceless time during this one precious life and spend it on a social media platform. Of course, there are plenty of benefits I can think of. And I know from 12 years of experience that the tips and the tricks and the insider skills that I will share will undoubtedly save you some of that precious time, particularly for taking photos, obviously. But I want to save your time in order for you to spend it doing things like taking the dog for an extra long walk on that rare, perfectly sunny day when it's not too hot or not too cold. Not using that saved time to make 3 reels in a week instead of 1. I want to save you time so that you can feel confident sharing your beautiful work with the world because it lights you up, not because the algorithm told you so. I want to teach makers how to take better photographs of their work because at my core, I believe without a doubt that the more independent artists who build not only viable, but life-giving businesses in this world, the better our chance for our societies to become more just and equitable. I know that's a big, audacious claim to make, and it opens up a whole other topic to discuss. It's actually a topic I already touched upon over in episode 217, so I'm not going to get off track this time. Let me try to wrap this all up. I hope that this rare solo episode has shed a bit of light on the myth of growth and encouraged you to think critically when it comes to things like follower counts and real views. Growth purely for the sake of growth can be fruitless and exhausting. At the same time, strategic growth can provide life-giving solutions to making a living from the things you make. And there are still plenty of ways to succeed at that growth in today's endless social media cycle. More often than not, that success has come from showing up consistently. If you've decided that now is indeed the time to finally figure out a way to show up consistently online, and that ending the battle with your camera or your cell phone when it comes to taking a good professional-looking photo is crucial to that consistency, then pop on over to themakersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography to join my upcoming free live webinar about the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes and how to avoid them. I cannot wait to see all of the aha moments that are sure to happen over the next week as I shed some light on the quick and easy ways to make photographing your work easier. It's been thrilling to see each cohort of students light up, realizing it wasn't actually their fault for not knowing what to do. I'm going to be online a lot amidst hosting this webinar so that I can answer any and all of your questions and help you finally get unstuck. So by all means, feel free to reach out, whether that be on Instagram at The Maker's Playbook or straight into my email, hello@makers-playbook.com. So after all this, we will have a brief 2-week break from the new podcast episodes, but we'll be back on September 19th, hopefully with some big news I have been dying to share with you all. I'm going to stop now before I ruin the surprise. All right, my friends, until next time, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this.